Are you Jim McKay? I was interrupting a routine Friday night argument with my lovely wife Anne about whether it was better for a woman to do her own shopping, or in our case, whether the poor, depressed husband, after a hard week at work, should be deprived of the opportunity to have a cold drink straight from the refrigerator. I turned around with a big smile, thinking it was probably just another Saints fan wanting my autograph. This is for sleeping with my wife, you bastard. Fuck. My nose exploded in pain under some bastard's fist, and I collapsed like the proverbial sack of shit, falling backwards as the shock instantly transferred to my legs before I hit the back of my head on something very, very hard. Shaking my head, I struggled to stand up, barely making out the big dark-haired guy in my blurry eyes as he quickly walked away from me, and my brain went into panic mode as I blacked out. I think it's worth telling a little about myself. My name is Jim McKay. I am 39 years old. I'm just over 6 feet tall and built like a brick house. I'm a handsome man with a figure like Brad Pitt and hair like an aged rock star. My hair is indeed quite long, although now streaked with gray, but my face is, well, let's just say battle-worn. I'm actually just over 6 feet tall and have a really powerful build, so it's not all a lie. My poor nose has now been broken for the 4th time, leaving it irregularly shaped, stretched across most of my face, and with many scars above both my eyes. I played the great game of rugby league 384 times for my local team, St. Helens, a small town in the northwest of England about 14 miles from Liverpool, playing for just over 12 years until I retired in 2004 at the age of 30 from knee injuries. I also played 32 international matches for England or Great Britain, often against our arch rivals Australia, whom I hate with a passion, but at the same time respect very much. You could say that at one time I was a bit of a star. However, I had a problem with a short temper. My temperament became known early in my professional rugby career, and rival teams often used this against me, provoking me to react and causing the referee to send me to the penalty box for 10 minutes, or worse, send me off for the rest of the game. Anyone who follows rugby league knows that playing short-handed, even for a short time, creates great difficulties for the rest of the team. The senior players kept trying to tell me what was going on and pointed out how if I didn't get a grip on myself, my career would be over before it really began. Eventually, the club got tired of it, and they sent me to anger management courses. This helped a lot, but the problem remained, and I had to make a conscious effort to control myself despite provocation. Now I try to count to 10 when I feel angry. This works most of the time, but sometimes I only get to 2 or 3 before I explode. I was making good money for a rugby league player, nowhere near what those pampered footballers made, but enough to save for retirement. After retiring, I became the manager of a local hardware store that was owned by a big Saints fan and eventually bought his business when he wanted to retire. We have since expanded the business to include a large organic garden center, which has become quite a profitable business. I also part-time coach the Saints Junior Academy team along with a few ex-players and have a great time trying to get the boys up to the level required for the first team. In general, everything is going very well for us. When I say we, I mean me and my second wife, Anne. She is a beautiful blonde, 10 years younger than me, the daughter of a wonderful lady named Mary and a scoundrel named Ralph Harvey. You might think that I don't get along well with my father-in-law, and you'd be absolutely right. I can't stand this loud, drunk idiot. He's one of those ex-pros that all the players hate. He played about a dozen times for the first team back in the 80s, but to listen to him, it sounded like he was one of the greatest of all time. He always shows up at ex-player events at the club, invariably gets so drunk he can barely stand, and rants to every poor soul he can get his hands on about how great his team were and how no other player today could have played in his time. This is what you need when you're trying to have a quiet drink while meeting old friends. Anna, as I said, is my second wife. I met her when she had just returned from university after finishing her fine art course in 2006. I was at the rugby club's annual children's Christmas party for the local children's home, playing Santa Claus, when her mother brought her over and introduced us. I think I fell in love with her at that very moment. She was 22 at the time, so the giddy thoughts of young girls sitting on Santa's lap that immediately popped into my head were just a little twisted for a 32-year-old divorcee, who, by the way, hadn't had a woman in at least 2 years of the year. Anna knew almost everything about me. She was, and remains, a big rugby fan, so when she learned that Mary knew me well, she begged her mother to introduce us. We chatted like old friends for about the next half hour. Mary left us a couple of minutes after we met, and I found it much easier to talk to her than any other woman since my very high-conflict divorce the year before. My first marriage ended extremely unpleasantly, to put it mildly. I married Diana in 1996 after we had been dating for just over 2 years. I was just over 21 and she was 24, and we were very much in love at first. She gradually became jealous of my growing fame and local popularity, hating every time a fan asked for my autograph when we were together, often acting extremely rude when doing so. We learned early on that Diana was having trouble conceiving a child, which didn't bother me too much at the time, but she was very shaken by it, and it caused a lot of problems in our relationship. I realize now that not being able to conceive must have been a terrible blow to her sense of femininity, but at the time I was definitely insensitive to her needs. Anyway, our marriage lasted several years, and in 2004 she decided that she wanted something that would belong only to her, separate from me. She had always loved drawing and painting since childhood, so she enrolled in an art course at a local evening college. There she met that Cockney jerk, as he quickly became known in our family circle. It was Paul DeFries, and he was her teacher at school. He was older than her, 42 to her 31, and was a typical artistic teacher of adult education. He could not draw himself, but felt qualified enough to teach others. He was a tall, skinny jerk, always dressed in someone else's old clothes, and with the stupidest haircut you've ever seen, almost completely bald on top with a ponytail that almost reached his waist in the back. Imagine what a complete idiot. Over the next few months, he began taking her out for drinks after class, and it appears these quick drinks turned into a full-blown affair. She started dating him while I was away at games, and I imagine they had a lot of sex. All this became clear during the divorce. He finally convinced her that she was too intellectual and smart to be with me, a Neanderthal, and she would be much better off with him. It all came to a head when she blithely announced to me at home one Sunday evening that she had fallen in love with someone else, wanted a divorce, and wanted half of everything we had. She moved in with him that night. The next day, she lifted the restraining order preventing me from contacting her or him, citing that I was a very dangerous person, as evidenced by my profession, and she was afraid that I would attack her and her new partner. She knew me so well that if I got anywhere near that little shit, I would rip some of it off and hang them around her damn adulterous neck. However, being a local celebrity has its perks, and I was able to hire the best and most ruthless divorce lawyer in the area. But they were poor and could not. Using their admitted infidelity and my heartbroken innocence, my shark lady lawyer took them to the dry cleaners, proving to the court that my wife abandoned our marriage to commit adultery with someone who should, as a teacher, be above reproach. The judge agreed with her and awarded me the house and most of our property, and Diana received alimony of £50 per week for 3 years, or until she remarried, whichever came first. Now Mr. DeFries may have considered himself superior in every way to a dumb, uneducated lout like me, but that didn't stop this money-hungry couple from living together for 3 years and getting married only a week after her damn alimony ran out. I may well get the impression that I'm bitter about all this, but I'm damn right. The experience with Diane and the jerk made me suspicious and distrustful of almost every woman I dated over the next few months. Sure, I dated a few times, but I could never allow myself to get emotionally involved with any of them. I only had sex with 3 of them, all once, and then I met Anna. We became close friends long before we became lovers, getting to know each other very well, much to the chagrin of her asshole father. Coincidentally, given how Diane met the jerk, Anne introduced me to fine art and other so-called intellectual pursuits. After I retired from rugby, We often went to London for weekends, always visiting world-famous art galleries, and even going to the opera in Covent Garden a few times. I've always been a big rock fan, so to say that the whole thing was a culture shock for me would be an understatement. Anna took time to explain to me what actually made a painting or sculpture great rather than just very good. She really loves her art, but unlike Prick, she knows she is not talented enough as an artist herself, and now works as an art historian and curator at the Tate Gallery in Liverpool. We were actually friends for 3 years before we became lovers, although I already knew months ago that I was deeply in love with her. However, I was still very nervous about making the commitment, clearly mentally scarred by my previous disastrous family experiences. Eventually, in 2010, Anna was clearly fed up with my lack of commitment to our relationship. So, on her 26th birthday, as we languished in the glorious afterglow of a wonderful 2 hours of lovemaking, she decided to take everything from my hands and turned to face me with a stern expression on her beautiful face. James Mackay, I've been in love with you since I was 14, and I've been in love with you since I met you. So unless you fucking ask me to marry you right now, I'm going to be on fire for you. What could a person say to this? We got married 6 months later in her favorite church, surrounded by all our friends, family, and lots of ugly ex-rugby players. Very slowly, I began to come to my senses. My head gradually cleared, my eyes tried to focus, and eventually I was able to see a small crowd gathered around me. With difficulty, I tried to get to my feet. I felt a firm hand on my chest push me back to the ground where I was lying. I'm a nurse. Please don't try to get up, sir. You've had a bad blow to the head. Throwing my head back on the paper towels placed under my bleeding skull, I gradually focused on the dark brown features of my assistant. My name is Rose, and I am the head nurse at St. Luke's Theater. You have a serious injury, and it appears your nose is broken, so please do not move until the ambulance arrives. Her voice had a distinct South African accent, and I could see that she was a big girl, as they say. Her breasts were perhaps the largest I had ever seen from below, stretching her dark blue scrubs to the limit. Although she was a caring professional, there didn't seem to be much sympathy in her voice as she continued. Obviously, this isn't the first time your nose has been broken by the looks of it, but a blow to the back of the head can be a big problem. So please just lie there until the paramedics arrive. Now that my eyes were focusing better, I could look around at the rapidly growing crowd of onlookers, slowly noticing their facial expressions. Not concern, sympathy, or any of the other natural emotions one would normally show towards someone who may be seriously injured, but instead judgment on some and outright amusement on most. Completely ignoring Sister Rose's advice, I tried to stand up, only to feel dizzy again and had to sit down with my back against the concrete pillar that I had apparently hit my head on when I fell. Please, Mr. McKay, please don't move. Your head could have been seriously injured. Feeling that something was wrong with the good sister, I asked her quietly, "Where is my wife? Where is Anne?" "You mean the blonde?" After getting knocked down by another person, she loaded all her shopping into the car and sped out of here like a bat out of hell. What? Why? Did she say something? Giving me a stern, disapproving look, looking around at the other onlookers, she replied, "Actually, yes, she said a lot and screamed even more." Completely stunned, I asked. She was screaming, "What? Why didn't she stay to help me?" "She's called you a lot of wrong names, Mr. Minty McKay, most of which I would never use, but she doesn't seem to approve of the idea of you sleeping with someone else's wife. And if I may say so, Mr. Barry McKay, I totally agree with her. Unfaithful husbands deserve to have their noses broken. But I never cheated on her." I muttered, trying to understand what was going on. "Excuse me? What did you say, Mr. Gussie McKay?" the kind sister asked, leaning towards me to hear me better. I said I never cheated on her. I would never do that. She knows I couldn't. "Mr. Kai McKay, I saw and heard everything, and I certainly don't think another gentleman would hit you like that without a good reason," objected the reproachful Sister Rose. I've now become quite annoyed at what seems to be a complete misunderstanding. I have no idea who he is, let alone who his wife is, and I'm telling you, I've never slept with another man's wife. I almost shouted with indignation by that time. Mr. McKay, there is absolutely no need to swear like that. Please refrain from using such language. Sorry, sister, I just can't figure out what just happened here. I replied, being duly reprimanded by my savior angel, while most of the rapidly growing crowd laughed at my discomfort as the first witnesses informed the new arrivals about what was happening. I don't think I'm the one you need to convince, Mr. Mackay, but I don't think you'll be sleeping with your own wife anytime soon either. And that's how I ended up in the emergency department of St. Luke's General Hospital at 11:45 p.m. on a Friday night in June. Sister Rose very kindly told the arriving paramedics what happened as they loaded me into the ambulance. Of course, one of them turned out to be a mocking Australian bastard. Lance spent the entire trip mocking the big international rugby league player who was knocked out with one blow, telling me it was long overdue for what I had done to Aussie heroes in the past. The idiot even took a photo of my bloody face on his mobile phone to send to his friends back home in good old Australia. His colleague was no better. She was a sweet young lady who clearly did not approve of cheating husbands, making it obvious that she shared Sister Rose's opinion. She must have gotten her turn to install the Roman 4 that the medics have to insert as part of the procedure, and she clearly took advantage of it. What the hell happened to all the caring professionals our health service is supposed to be? I'm sure the bitch used a dull needle because it hurt like hell when she put that stuff in. These two friendly doctors wheeled me straight to the emergency room on a gurney, leaving me at the mercy of the emergency room staff. Of course, they had to tell everyone who would listen who I was and what had happened to me, so again I was faced with complete indifference to my well-being from all the nurses there. Eventually, the doctor on duty was able to examine me, a woman, of course, who examined the back of my head with the care I expected from a busy, tired professional. She took one look and sent me for an X-ray. Luckily, the orderly in charge of the wheelchair that wheeled me to the X-ray room was a big Saints fan. He took great pleasure in telling me how he was at Wembley when I scored the winning goal against Wigan in the 1998 Cup final. This was not surprising as almost everyone I have ever spoken to from St. Helens claimed to have been there on that great day. By the way, that day was the greatest of my rugby career. Hearing 35,000 Saints fans sing Martha and the Vandellas' Jimmy Mack as I walked back from scoring a last-minute goal to win the cup against our greatest rival of all teams. Well, it just doesn't get any better than that. Bob, the orderly, kindly asked me if there was anyone he could report my location and injuries to, so I gave him my wife Ann's cell number and asked him to call her. Leaving me with a promise to do so, he left me at the X-ray station. Unfortunately, Bob was clearly a gossip. He simply had to tell the radiologists on duty what he had heard about me. Apparently, I had been beaten up by a jealous husband for sleeping with his wife for years, so again I was conscientiously ignored by one and all until there was no one else left to X-ray. Then I had to wait for busy Bob to come back and take me back to see the doctor. He eventually came back for me, took me back to the emergency room, and dropped me off in the waiting room. Again, all the way back he insisted on talking about rugby, barely letting me get a word in until his voice echoed in my throbbing head. As he was leaving, he suddenly remembered what I had asked him to do for me and said loud enough for everyone in the waiting room to hear. "By the way, Jim, I called your wife as you asked. She said, and I quote, 'Let that cheater rot in hell for all I care.' Here I am, sitting in the middle of a very busy, crowded emergency room, waiting for the doctor on duty to take the time to examine me and hopefully stitch up my wounds and send me home. By this time, I was fully conscious, but still had no idea who hit me or why the hell he thought I was sleeping with his wife. Looking around, I could see the amusement, contempt, and outright contempt on the faces of most of the patients and staff who waited with me. I could hear most of the whispers, everyone accusing me of being a cheating bastard who clearly couldn't keep his gun in his pants. "To be honest, I haven't slept with anyone's wife but my own," I said, addressing no one in particular, but loud enough for everyone to hear. I have no idea who this guy is or his wife. I swear on my mother's life I don't. Yes, sure, came the answer from some unidentified woman. I did not sleep, I shouted. At the sound of my raised voice, the guard on duty, a big guy who was obviously a frustrated cop and needed a uniform to prove his manhood, hurried towards me. Having glanced at my expression, he apparently decided that it was better to refrain from action and stopped in place. Jim, please don't make trouble, he pleaded. I don't want to call the police. No problem, just leave me alone, I barked. Anyone who has ever sought help in a busy emergency department on a Friday night will understand how long the wait can be to be served by overworked and stressed staff who are unhappy to be on duty and deal with all the drunks and other antisocial elements that show up during this time of the week, so it's no surprise that I had to wait forever to be examined. I was eventually called back to the same doctor who first examined me, and she took a close look at the x-rays of my battered skull while I sat there. No sign of a fracture, Mr. Binlow McKay, but I think I'd like you to stay the night so we can observe to see if there are any problems later. 24 hours should be plenty. I'm fine now, Doc, just a bit of a headache. It's no worse than a lot of times on the rugby field, I replied, perhaps a little harshly. Who's the doctor here, Mr. McKay? How would you like it if I started telling you how to play this stupid game? You'd be in good company, Doc. Every week thousands tell me what I'm doing wrong, I replied, trying to soften the situation. I'm sure I'll be fine, and I'd really like to go home if that's the case. Maybe. If you insist, sir, I cannot physically stop you from leaving here, but I must insist that you sign a document stating that you are leaving the hospital against all my recommendations. Obviously, you know much more about the possible consequences of a serious blow to the head than a simple experienced emergency doctor who studied at the university for 6 years and has been working in this department for the last 5 years. Turning and picking up a medical razor, she continued her moralizing tone. You are, of course, a highly skilled amateur who apparently knows much better how thick your skull is and how little harm a gentle collision between a human skull can cause. Take it, a concrete pillar. Sensing that her patience might be wearing thin, I decided it would be best to keep my mouth shut while she shaved an unreasonably large patch of hair at the back of my head to stitch me up. Here are 7 stitches, Mr. B.D. McKay. I'm sure you know the procedure. They should dissolve in about a week and will leave you with another good scar to add to your collection. Please see your doctor next week to make sure it doesn't. Infection in the wound, and I must emphasize how important this is, despite your excellent knowledge of these matters. If you experience any dizziness or changes in vision, return here immediately. Turning away from me and putting away the needle equipment, she continued, turning her back to me. I also suggest that you avoid encounters with jealous husbands in the future, Mr. Pam McKay. Damn it, Doc, I haven't slept with anyone's wife. It's all a big misunderstanding, I exclaimed. Why does everyone think I'm some kind of cheating bastard? As they say, Mr. McKay, if the hat fits. Now please, if you insist on leaving, do so. We are extremely busy here, as you can see. By then, it was 1:30 a.m. On a Saturday morning, a great time to try to get a taxi home. I tried calling Anne on her mobile and also on her home phone, and since my parents were on vacation, a taxi was the only option. Finally, at about 2:45 a.m., my ride home finally arrived. Ollie looked at my bloody clothes and immediately declared, I won't take a drunk from the hospital. Please call another taxi, mister. Jumping into the back seat before he could move, I barked at him, I'm not drunk. Now take me home before I get really angry. Okay, mister, just please don't bleed in my car. I work all night, and I don't think my other passengers would like it if their clothes got dirty. No problem, buddy, I replied. Half an hour later, we arrived at my house. After I got out of the taxi and he drove away, I noticed for the first time that my car was parked in the driveway and Anne's SUV was missing. This meant that she had at least returned home and put away her shopping. As I walked around my locked car, I slowly realized that I was locked out of not only my house, but also my car, and I had no keys to get in. Of course, I did what any calm, rational, clear-thinking man with a broken nose and 7 stitches in the back of his head would do under the circumstances. I broke the door. Before I even made it to the bedroom, the powerful painkillers they gave me immediately knocked me out, and I fell asleep on the couch. However, I remember thinking at that moment that someone would pay for all this before I fell asleep. I woke up a little after 10 a.m. on Saturday morning feeling like absolute crap. My head hurt, my nose seemed the size of a small mountain, and the lump on the back of my head. Well, let's just say it was very painful. I dragged myself to the bathroom and completed my morning routine. Surprisingly, I had the usual morning excitement, but getting help while sitting like a woman solved that little problem. Then I took a shower, trying not to get my hair wet, as the sympathetic doctor told me yesterday. I didn't shave, then looked in the mirror to comb my hair. Damn, what a view. My nose was covered with a stupid bandage that stretched across both cheeks, and my eyes were as black as a damn panda's. After getting dressed, I threw the bloody t-shirt I'd worn the night before in the trash, threw my jeans in the laundry basket, and then made myself a cup of coffee. I thought I knew exactly where she might have gone, so the first thing I decided to do was fix the front door. She had been the object of all my frustrations and anger earlier and didn't look her best, hanging on its hinges with a broken lock and door frame. I called Alan, my assistant manager at work and probably my best friend in the world, and asked him to bring a new door, frame and lock as soon as possible, refusing to explain when he asked why I needed a new door so urgently and telling him to keep it to himself. A couple of hours later, we had the new door installed and Alan left with strict instructions not to tell anyone anything. He tried a couple of times to find out why I was walking like a bear with a sore butt, why my face and head were in such a state, and what happened to the door. The first time he asked, I muttered that it was none of his business. Then, when he asked again a little later, he received a rude answer from me and was not very politely informed not to pry his nose. Resisting the temptation to mention that I would probably be better off not prying, he helped me install the new door before returning to work, taking away all the remnants of my unwarranted attack on the door. By this time, it was after 3:00 p.m., and I really needed to contact Anne and explain that it had all been a misunderstanding and convince her to come home to care for her unjustly injured husband. I was right. She went to her parents' house. Her SUV was in their driveway when I pulled up, so I parked behind it to keep her from driving away again. I hurried up the path, rang the doorbell, and waited to see who would answer. A few seconds later, Mary, my beautiful mother-in-law, opened the door to a crack, having first installed a security chain and looked out through the narrow crack. She shuddered when she saw the state I was in, and the expression of sympathy on her face quickly changed to an expression of stern disapproval. "James, how could you?" she asked, still not letting me into the house. "How could you change Anne in this way? I thought you were better than this." Mary always used my full name when I seriously messed up, so I kept a calm and quiet tone as I responded, "Mary, I never cheated on Diana, despite what she put me through, and I would never cheat on Anne honestly. Please let me in so I can talk to her and explain everything." "No, James, she doesn't want to talk to you right now. She's furious. She thought you were the love of her life, and she's so disappointed in you." "I know it looks bad, Mary, but I really don't know who this guy is, or who his damn wife is. Let me explain this to Anne. Please. Let me try to convince her to at least listen to you, James. I definitely want to believe you. I love you like my own son, and it would break my heart, not to mention Anne's, if all of this turned out to be true." She closed the door again in my face and walked deeper into the house. I hoped it was to persuade Anne to let me talk to her. A couple of minutes later, the door was chained open again, and there was the face of my cocky father-in-law. "I always knew you were a scoundrel, you arrogant jerk. I should never have let my daughter marry you." He blurted out at me, protected by the door, "Count yourself lucky that I'm not 20 years younger. Otherwise, I would give you the rebuff you deserve, you traitor." This was too much. I wasn't going to put up with such disgusting behavior from a jerk like him. My anger quickly grew until I shouted back, "You disgusting asshole." Firstly, never in your wildest fantasies could you fight me back, as you so colorfully expressed it, and in secondly, I never changed. This definitely didn't go to plan, I thought as the door slammed in my face. I saw Mary looking at me from the living room window, so I walked over and beckoned her to open it. She did as I asked, opening the window slightly, just enough so that I could hear her. "Please go away, Jim. Let me work on this. There's no chance she'll want to talk to you while you and her dad are here together." "Okay, Mary, I'll go away for a while. I still don't trust myself around this asshole, but please tell her what I said. I'll call her in a short time and try to talk to her, if that's okay. I'll try to convince her to talk to you, Jim, although I can't promise anything. Her father is insisting that she divorce you and get rid of you for good, but leave it to me. You know how he is. He'll calm down in a couple of days." I didn't expect anything less from him, Mary. Why did such a beautiful lady like you ever marry such a disgusting idiot? You could have chosen anyone better than him. I said this quietly, having calmed my anger a little thanks to my beautiful mother-in-law. "You know how it is, Jim. You went through it with Diana. Sometimes you just can't choose who you fall in love with," she replied softly, a tear rolling down her cheek. "Now please go away and let me try to calm you down. Everyone's here. Call me in a couple of hours and I'll tell you what's going on." I softly kissed her teary cheek, whispering, "Thank you for everything, Mary. I'll talk to you later." I returned home and lounged around the house for a couple of hours before calling Anne on my cell phone around 8:00 p.m. "Hi, Jim. Sorry, darling. It's Mary, not Anne. She's gone to spend a couple of days with our George in Leeds and will be back on Monday. Just let her cool off, okay, darling? I'm sure she'll talk to you when she gets back." George is Anne's younger brother. He plays for Leeds Rugby Club and luckily is one of my best friends, so I knew he wouldn't turn her against me like her dad did. "Okay, Mary," I replied calmly, holding back my irritation out of a desire to bring my wife home where she belongs. "When you talk to her, please tell her that this is all a big misunderstanding and that I love her more than anything. Light. I know you love Jim. I'm sure she'll understand that you would never cheat on her, despite what Ralph tries to tell her. Our George and his wife will set her right. I'll ask her to call you when she comes back, okay?" "Thank you, Mary. I'm sorry about all this, but honestly, I have no idea what's going on." I replied, "I'll talk to you later when I hopefully figure out what the hell is going on." "Okay, honey, goodbye." I decided to go to the supermarket on Sunday afternoon to ask the manager for a copy of the CCTV footage of me being attacked on Friday evening. Fortunately, he expected the police to come with questions, so the recording was ready. Unfortunately, all the footage showed me getting hit by a big guy in a bomber jacket and jeans. It was impossible to identify him from the recording as his face was never fully visible, so I never knew who he was. The store manager, also a big Saints fan, gave me a copy of the footage and tried to apologize for the attack that took place on his premises. I explained that the only person to blame was the one who hit me, and that the store manager was absolutely not to blame for anything. I then went home and minded my own business, trying to figure out who might actually be behind the attack after watching the grainy video footage several times. I finally gave up and went to bed after taking a few more painkillers that my favorite doctor at the emergency room prescribed. Monday morning started out great. I came to work early and sat in my office, hoping to avoid unnecessary contacts. It didn't work out very well. The tongue-tied Allen had apparently already turned everyone against me because there was a stream of employees and familiar clients who needed to see me for one reason or another. Anyway, by lunchtime I heard a quiet knock on the door of my office and invited whoever it was to come in. Little Angie, our green-fingered garden manager, poked her head in the door and immediately burst into tears when she saw my battered face. "Oh God, I'm so sorry, Jim. I didn't know," she sobbed, running into the room and hugging me. "Hey, Angie, don't worry about me, honey," I replied, patting her on the back, touched by her concern. "I'll be fine. Just hope I find the bastard who did this and deal with him once and for all." "That's the problem, Jim. I know who it was," she mumbled between sobs. "What? How can you know that? You weren't even there on Friday, and you certainly didn't see the video of what happened." She moved away from me and sat down on the chair on the other side of my desk. "I'm so sorry, Jim," she sobbed again. "You don't understand." Looking at her with bewilderment, I asked, "What don't I understand?" Angie, inviting her to continue. "Please forgive me, Jim. It's all my fault," she cried, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I think you better calm down and explain everything, baby," I replied, intrigued by what she was saying. "How can it be your fault?" "It's my husband, Jim. It's my damn husband who attacked you." "What? Your husband? But why the hell would he think I was sleeping with you?" Anger rose in me as I sat there, completely stunned by what was happening. I know I'm just a stupid ex-athlete, but I would definitely remember if we ever slept together. By this time, Angie was already on the verge of hysterics, recoiling from my anger and covering her face with her hands. She spread her fingers and peered through them at me before speaking again. "Please, Jim, let me explain. I think you better, girl, stop fucking crying and tell me why your husband thought I slept with you." I stood up and poured us both some coffee from the constantly simmering coffee maker on the cabinet in the back of my office. Throwing her a box of tissues that I had on the table, I sat down again and placed the coffee in front of her. "Okay, Angie, now explain," I said sternly. "I hope you have a good explanation, because I'm really pissed off. I have a broken nose, stitches in the back of my head, and eyes like a goddamn panda." She sank deeper into her chair as I continued. "And on top of all this, my wife left me because she believes that I, quite understandably, cheated on her. I saw my secretary Maureen, 62 and nosy as hell, eavesdropping at her desk, trying to appear busy with secretarial business. "Maureen," I shouted through the closed door, "go have a cup of tea or something." "Yes, Jim," she replied, running off, no doubt to tell the rest of the staff what she had heard. "Okay, Angie, explain to me how I could sleep with you without knowing it." The sweet little 25-year-old girl blew her nose like a real soldier, using a tissue before speaking. "Jim, you don't know my husband, do you? He's so jealous, always has been." "I'm sorry to hear that, Angie, but what made him think we, you know?" "He's beating me up, Jim. He's beating me up so bad." With that, she lifted her shirt and showed me her badly bruised ribs, red, blue, and black mixed with the yellow of old healing bruises. I remembered how we all noticed that Angie had started wearing heavier makeup a few months ago, and we all thought it was just a fashion thing. "Damn it, Angie. Why didn't you tell anyone?" I told her quietly. "I hate men who beat women. I had enough reasons to slap Diana several years ago, but it never occurred to me to stoop to such a level. You don't know, Jim. Not many people do. I grew up in an orphanage after being abandoned as a baby. I have no family, Jim, no one to turn to. I was ashamed to tell my friends what was happening. I thought I was nobody, and he wouldn't believe it. He's so cute when other people are around, and he's such a big man, you know. I'm so scared of him, Jim." "How long has this been going on, Angie?" I asked quietly, feeling the urge to hug this poor little girl. "When did he start hitting you like that?" She wiped her eyes and replied, "Ever since he first lost his job, about 2 years ago. He started drinking heavily and hanging out with a bunch of drunks, and although it was never true, he started imagining that I was cheating on him. At work, I tried to assure him that I really loved him and would never cheat, but these bastards, so-called friends, mocked him, saying that I had lost respect for him because he lost his job and I would look for someone. Then it's better, like all damn women do, when their man can no longer satisfy them." She began to cry again, sobbing like a baby, covering her face with her hands. "It's stupid, but now I don't really love him anymore. This has all become too complicated, and the love I once had for him has been beaten out of me by him." I walked around my desk and pulled her to her feet, hugging her, trying to comfort her. Why didn't you just leave him, girl? Why are you staying with him if you don't love him anymore? You don't have kids, so there wouldn't be a problem. Like I said, Jim, she sobbed into my chest. I'm an orphan and I have no family at all. All our money is invested in the house, and I literally have nowhere to go. Why didn't you go to the police? I'm sure you could have gotten a restraining order against him. Hell, Diana got one against me years ago, and I never even touched her. I'm so scared of him, Jim. He threatened to kill me if I went to the police. He says they can't watch him all the time, and sooner or later he'll get to me and finish me off once and for all. The poor girl was already sobbing heartily, clinging to me like a frightened child. This will stop right now, Angie. You leave this bastard to me, I said as I let her sit back down and then walked back to my side of the table. I sat quietly, trying to control my inner rage, wondering what I was going to do to help her. Slowly, from the depths of my razor-sharp mind, I realized something. I get it, Angie, but why on earth would he think that you and I... You know, I may be an insensitive jerk at times, but even I would definitely remember having sex with a girl as cute as you and me. Breaking into tears again, she covered her face with her hands and replied, Last Friday afternoon, after I returned home from work, he was waiting for me, drunk again. He was in a bad mood and immediately attacked me when I walked in the door, demanding to know who it was and threatening to kill me if I didn't tell him. I again tried to tell him that there was no one else but him. Didn't believe me. He started beating me. My face was now dark as thunder as she continued, I honestly thought that was it, Jim, and he was finally going to kill me. I lay there in terrible pain when he grabbed me by the throat. You shouldn't interfere in my life. I just said the first name that came into my head, and it was yours. I'm so sorry, Jim. She cried into her heaving chest. Now I began to understand all this. This no-good prick must have followed Anne and me to the supermarket on Friday night. Well, he's damn sure he'll pay, not only for breaking my nose and making my wife believe I was forcing myself on her, but for what that wife-beating bastard did to the distraught little lady sitting in front of me. Looking at my watch, I saw that it was almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I knew that Anne should already be with her parents, so I began to make a plan. Angie, I want you to stay with us for a while. Give me a chance to sort this out for you, I said. She perked up noticeably when I said this, relief that she was no longer alone with her problems quickly spreading across her tear-stained features. Oh my God, Jim. Thank you so much. I really don't deserve friends like you, she sobbed quietly. Just one thing. I want you to come with me and explain everything to Anne. She still thinks I cheated on her, and I need to clear that up before I do anything. Oh, Jesus, Jim, I'm so sorry for causing you so much grief. Of course, I'll talk to her. Let me explain what a loving and caring husband she has. Angie walked around the table and hugged me again, peppering my battered face with kisses. Laughing quietly, I pushed her away from me and said, Angie, covering my face with your lipstick won't help my case. Oh, sorry, Jim, she said. Let me wipe this off. She started rubbing my face with her napkins, still wet from her tears. Damn it, girl, my nose is broken and it hurts. Stop. I'll go to the bathroom and wash myself, and you pack your things and we'll go straight to Anne's. And stop the damn thing, apologize, I shouted at her, pushing her towards the office door. We stopped at Angie's house before heading off to meet Anne. She told me her husband's asshole would be at the pub all day, so it seemed a good time to pick up some of her things if she was going to be staying with us for a while. At about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we arrived at Mary and Ralph's house. I saw Anne's car in the driveway, so I knew she had to be home. After telling Angie to wait in the car while I went to get my wife, I quickly walked to the front door of their house and knocked on it. Mary opened it almost immediately, apparently seeing me walking down the driveway. This time, the security chain was not in place. Anne's back yet, Mary? I asked politely. Yes, love, she is here. Unfortunately, Ralph is also home. I have no problem with this. Can I come in, please? I said quietly to my mother-in-law. Of course, come in. She replied, but please don't start a fight with him again. I don't want to come between you again. Mary's face showed concern as she led me into the house. I felt behind her at that moment, being in the same position as her, and hugged her, giving her a light kiss on the cheek. I think everything will be fine in a minute or two. Don't worry, lovely lady, I whispered to her as we entered the main living room. Anne was sitting facing the door from which we had entered. Her father stood at the window, looking angrily at me, but trying very hard to keep his daughter between me and him. What do you want now, asshole? He snapped at me. I thought I told you that you were no longer welcome in my house. I don't want any trouble, Ralph. I just want to talk to my wife, I said quietly but firmly, emphasizing mine. She doesn't want to talk to you. Now leave before I throw you out. He responded, moving even further behind his daughter. Oh my gosh, Dad, Anne screamed at her father. How many times do I have to ask you to keep your damn nose out of my marriage? I thought Ralph's face was going to explode as he turned beet red, his anger obvious to everyone. Luckily, with a loud snore, he turned and started looking out the window at my car parked on the street in front of his house. Okay, Jim, I'm listening, said Anne. Let's hear what you have to say. Anne, honey, I tried to tell you that it was a misunderstanding, and now I have proof. Please come out to my car and let's discuss this in private, I told her softly, trying not to anger her further. Then her father tried to intervene again, pulling her towards him as he shouted at me. Just get out of here. Anne doesn't want to talk. What's that bird in your car, you moron? She has nothing to do with you. I responded calmly, ignoring the provocation and remembering my anger management techniques that I had been taught many years ago. Anne jumped up from her seat and hurried to her father. Looking out the window and then looking at me, she angrily asked, Is that her? Is that the bitch you had behind my back? And she's not like that at all. Now please come outside and talk to us, I said, still maintaining my outward calm. Let me explain to you what is happening. Her father tried to intervene again, pulling her towards him and shouting at me, Just get away from us. Anne doesn't want to talk to you or your damn bitch. That's all. I couldn't count to 10. I quickly closed the distance between me and my wife, her father recoiling from my advance. Anne, you're doing a damn good job of walking outside with me right now, I said forcefully, grabbing her hand tightly. Taking her in my arms like a little doll, I began to leave the room. Mary stood and watched all this, a mixture of sadness and fear on her face. Don't worry, Mary. You know that I will never harm your daughter, no matter what happens, I said, smiling as I walked past my concerned mother-in-law, heading towards the front door before leaving the house and quickly heading to my car. Anne was beating my chest with her small fists, her legs kicking madly as I carried her to the passenger seat of the car. Gently placing her feet on the ground, I kissed her forehead gently, opened the car door, and firmly made her sit in the front seat next to her. Angie was now sitting directly behind my wife. As I closed the door on my wife, I said quietly and as gently as I could, Just listen to her, Anne, let her explain. I'm sure you'll understand in a minute or two. I then leaned against the closed door, completely preventing Anna from escaping. After a few minutes of my wife's muffled screams, everything went quiet and I saw Angie crying again as she apparently began to tell my wife her story. I stood there for about 20 minutes or so, grinning back at my idiot father-in-law, who was glaring and gesturing at me from the safety of his home when a police car came around the corner. Their blues and twos were in full swing, making them quite difficult to ignore. Squealing to a stop in the path of my car, PC Fruit jumped out of the driver's seat and ran around the front of their jam jar, pulling out and extending his riot stick as he did just that. Hold on, dude, he shouted, crouching in a position that was obviously meant to be intimidating. Now lie face down on the floor and stretch out your arms and legs. I was about to tell him exactly where to put my stick and explain that I would never willingly expose my ass to such an obvious shirt man like him when his friend approached from the other side in their car. Hey, Kevin, don't you know anything? You're talking to Jimmy Mack. If you don't want to spend the next few days spitting teeth out of your dumb ass, I suggest you put your stick away and we'll politely ask him what's going on, okay? Intentionally putting himself between me and the kid with the acne, PC Sensible walked up to me and asked, "What's going on, Jim? We just received a report of an attempted kidnapping of some guy's little daughter at this address. You don't know anything about this, do you?" I immediately looked over at my in-law's house and saw idiot Ralph smirking at me as he watched the drama unfold. Taking a deep breath and counting to 10, I explained to Tommy as quickly and thoroughly as I could. He listened attentively, without even taking any notes, leaning against the car. With me, his buddy left us on the instructions of Tommy on the radio so that their screams would be sorted out without any problems. He apparently believed my version of events, and after he apologized for PC Fruit's overenthusiasm, Tommy then went into the house, where I could see him giving Ralph mother and father chatter about wasting the police's time and money. Then the stern-faced constable returned, winked at me, and stood with his back to the house. We then had a nice chat about how he had been a Saints fan for many years before he asked me to autograph his notebook for him, telling me how happy his son would be when he told him he had met me. He and his young girlfriend then left much more quietly than when they arrived. A couple of minutes later, Angie got out of my car and asked permission to let Ann out too. The two women immediately hugged and burst into tears, swearing eternal friendship to each other, before Anne turned to me and began showering me with kisses and hugging me tightly. "Oh my God, Jim," she exclaimed excitedly. "We have to help Angie. Her bastard husband was beating her for no reason. Can we help her, Jim? Please, dear, no one needs her." Smiling to myself at the irony of the situation, I replied, "I know, love. I already told her that she can stay with us for a while until we sort out the situation. Will you take her home? I just want to settle a few things. Things before I follow you, it won't take long." "Oh, Jim, I'm so sorry. I never really believed that you would cheat on me, honey. It's just, my damn hormones are going crazy right now. I'm so sorry." My loving wife sobbed, hugging my neck tightly, kissing my beaten face. "I understand, my sweet girl. Don't worry. Everything will be fine, dear." I laughed, stroking her huge belly. "The sooner we get these babies out, the better. Oh, did I forget to mention that we were expecting twins? Hormonal women, eh? What can you do with them?" After I saw the two ladies safely in Anne's car and explained to Mary's mother-in-law, I set out on a mission of revenge. A little later, I drove up to Angie's house with the full intention of talking to her husband Frank. I walked up to their front door and knocked confidently, only to find out that he had not yet returned from his drinking sessions. Contemplating whether to wait for him or not, I was leaning against the wall when a little old lady poked her head over the dividing fence and asked me if I was looking for that drunk bastard who lives here. Smiling at her accurate, if cruel, description of my goal, I replied that yes, I was looking for an opportunity to talk to her neighbor. Alice, she introduced herself after recognizing me, then told me what a complete bastard the man was, how badly he treated poor little Angie, and how long ago it was time for someone to deal with him. I laughed with her and assured her that he would get what he deserved, and asked if she knew where he might be. "Oh, don't worry about finding him, honey. He just got out of the taxi," she answered, pointing to the end of the driveway. "Okay, Alice, maybe you should call the police in a few minutes if you'd be so kind," I informed her as I stood up to face the approach of someone who was looking at me suspiciously as they walked up the garden path. "I hope you get your revenge on that idiot Jim. Give him some from me too, if you can," my new friend laughed as she left for her house. I turned to look at Angie's husband as he stopped a few feet away from me. My God, he was a big bastard. At least 6'4" tall, probably 18 or 19 stone in weight. Luckily, he looked out of shape and of course was drunk. "What the hell do you want, bastard?" he hissed at me, his face distorted with anger. "Haven't you played enough last time? A big star, yeah. Ha, one hit was enough to knock you out. They say you must be some kind of tough guy. What a laugh." He walked up to me confidently, saying, "That's what you get for having an affair with someone else's wife, the face of the face. Do you want more now that you're here? I just came to tell you that Angie will be living with me for the near future, and that she plans to report to the police as soon as I get back to her." I calmly answered him, activating my anger control therapy. "You are a bastard," he shouted at me. "Who the hell are you? She's my damn wife, and I'll treat her any way I want." "Oh, I don't think so, Frank. You can't use a little girl as a punching bag just because you're not the man to treat her properly," I said quietly, making sure that only he and I heard it. "And besides, bastard, I had my back to you last Friday, so let's see what you can do when I'm ready for you." Now, I learned long ago in my career how easy it is to provoke someone with an uncontrollable temperament. Hell, it's happened to me dozens of times, so I had no problem getting this drunken bully to react exactly the way I wanted. "Come on, big guy. Let's see how you can handle a real man, not a little woman. Your Angie likes real men, Frank." "You damn bastard!" he shouted and suddenly rushed at me. "I'll show you who the real man is here, you bastard." He came at me like a mad bull, swinging a huge circular punch with his right hand. Easily entering the intended blow, I hit him as hard as possible deep under the ribs. Gasping, he tried again. This time, a direct blow with his left hand to the bridge of his nose stopped him in his tracks. Then I threw a perfect right hook to the side of his face, and that was enough. He fell like a shot bear, face down on the lawn. I thought you said you were a tough guy." I snorted, laughing at him, relaxing. "Well done, Jimmy Mack." Alice returned to the fence, this time with the iPhone in her face. "I caught it all on camera, boy. I saw him attack you first, and you had to defend yourself." "Thanks, Alice," I said. "I think this will come in handy when the police come." Then I started walking down the path to my car, rubbing my knuckles. Suddenly, someone shouted, "Careful, Jim." When you play team contact sports, you usually learn a lot about spatial awareness. You always know exactly what is happening around you. As it turns out, this has always been one of my greatest strengths in my rugby career. I always somehow sensed when I was about to be attacked from the rear and could make the appropriate maneuvers to try to avoid it. So I felt, rather than heard, this big bleeding goon running after me from behind. Instead of trying to turn around and face him, I quickly leaned forward at the waist as he tried to hit me from behind. He rolled over my back, unable to stop due to his momentum. The garden shovel he had raised to attack me flew out of his hands as he tried to prevent himself from falling face first onto the concrete path. Oh, there he was in front of me, on his hands and knees, gasping for breath, trying to get up. His big fat ass was sticking up like some huge beast waiting to be mounted. I mean, how could I resist? It was too tempting a goal. I was never a hitter in my playing days, but that doesn't mean I couldn't kick a ball a long distance. I took careful aim and hit him as hard as I could, right between his raised thighs. Thinking to myself that this punch probably couldn't be considered self-defense, I turned to Alice and said, "It might be better if we didn't have video of this." "Don't worry, honey," she laughed and winked at me. "I'm not very good at using the damn thing anyway. My daughter insisted I buy it in case of an emergency. The damn camera must have turned off right after that." How he tried to attack you with a shovel. Leaving Alice to taunt the weeping wreck on the ground, I slowly walked downstairs towards the two policemen approaching me from the end of the driveway. "Hello again, Jim. Are you in trouble?" Guess what? Tommy and his spotted partner answered Alice's call. "I see you had a conversation with Big Frank." "No problem, Tommy. I just came to tell him that his wife left him and is going to go to the police about the constant beatings, and he seems to want to kill the messenger. Young Alice up there got it all on video, and I'm sure there will be enough witnesses here to corroborate my story," I said, pointing at the interested onlookers. "Okay, buddy. Looks like he's going to need the hospital, so we'll call an ambulance for him if you don't mind giving us a statement about what happened." Officer Tommy told his young colleague to call for an ambulance, and he and I sat in the back of his police car while I told him what happened from the beginning. He said that I would need to go to the station to give a formal statement and that it might be worth considering charging Big Frank with assault, since there was video of his initial attack on me, and given Alice's video and the testimony of all the witnesses, he has a good chance of ending up behind bars for a long time. I drove home to our house to meet two very attentive women. Angie was just grateful to have a safe place to stay, while my little fat, hormonal wife Anne went out of her way to show how sorry she was for ever doubting me. I explained to both of them that Frank Grimley was now in custody, that he was in the hospital under police guard, and that she no longer had anything to worry about. After a nice fish and chips dinner, Angie retired to our guest room for the night, hoping for her first good night's sleep in a long time, while my wife and I chatted on the sofa, snuggled up together as always. "I'm truly sorry, my dear," she said softly. "I should never have doubted you, I know." "It's all over, you fool. Just forget about it and don't be nervous," I playfully reproached. "Yes, I know, but if there is anything I can do to make it up to you," she whispered, kissing my lips softly, trying to avoid contact with my still sore nose.
Let me think.
I grinned lustfully. "I'm sure we can come to an agreement." "Oh yeah," she laughed. "And what do you mean, old lecher?" Turning her to face me, I placed both of my large hands on her gorgeous, full buttocks and squeezed them. Frank Grimley was eventually charged with spousal abuse or some other technical term for wife beating, as well as causing bodily harm to me. He was actually in the hospital for over a week. The judge publicly thanked me in court for coming to the aid of this poor, mistreated wife, and said that he intended to set an example for all abusive husbands. Frank was indeed completely calm during the trial and gave his testimony in a voice at least 2 octaves higher than his original. He did beg Angie for forgiveness, blaming his problems on the loss of his job and subsequent drinking, but the judge didn't like it. He sentenced Grimley to 10 to 15 years in prison with no chance of parole for at least 10 years. Angie divorced Grimley fairly quickly after the trial, and since their house was rented, she had no problem leaving a bad marriage. She stayed with us for several weeks before finding herself a nice apartment near our place of work and becoming a much happier and more sociable person. Unfortunately for her, she somehow fell in love with my best friend Alan. He had worshipped her from afar for several years, and now she was free, the dirty dog had made her move. Seriously, I'm very happy for them, and now, a few years later, they're living together in a beautiful semi-detached house just outside the city and are 3 months pregnant with their first child. Anna and we now have 2 wonderful children, James Jr., and the apple of my eye, Mary Elizabeth McKay. They are now almost 4 years old, and Anna is again 3 months pregnant. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.